A hypothetical trade for a former All-NBA player just hit my timeline, and I hate it. There's a hidden factor that would make this deal a nightmare for New Orleans. Let's break it down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this, what are we? We're on Tuesday here of Locked On Pelicans, and we are going to grade some trades. A trade for Domantas Sabonis of the Sacramento Kings that I hate, and I'll explain why for a variety of reasons. We're going to add Buddy Hield to this team, and it's not going to get a good grade either. Plus, the Pelicans sign Jalen McDaniels. Can he compete for the final roster spot? We're going to break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. That means, become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget, you can watch Locked On Pelicans on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every single weekday, 10:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Same place you watch your Pelicans play. So I said I wanted to grade some trades on the show. We're going to grade them. I've got a crazy one for you that we're going to lead off with. We're going to get into a more mundane but not workable trade, in my opinion, in the second segment here. So let's just kind of dive into a lot of these here. This one comes from Fanspo. They've got a really good trade machine here. And this one was posted by Zionista_Pels. This was about a week ago. And when this one got passed on to me, I was like, hold on, let's take a look. This is a 4-team deal involving the Lakers, Pelicans, Kings, and Mavericks. So let's break down the deal here. The Lakers get Jordan Hawkins. The Sacramento Kings get Zion Williamson, Yves Missi, and Carlo Makovic. The Mavericks get Jose Alvarado. And the Pelicans get Domantas Sabonis, PJ Washington, and Jared Vanderbilt here. That's the deal. There's a couple things with this one where other teams need to touch and all that, but you can figure that out with second round picks pretty easily. It's kind of the core here. And really the core of this deal, right, is Zion Williamson for Domantas Sabonis and then adding some more front court depth to the team here. I would give this, I'll just grade this trade right now. It's a C- at best for me. That might be me being kind of generous to this. And here's why. I want to get into this. Trading for Sabonis would be interesting if you're pairing him alongside Zion Williamson. He puts up good stats. In his 4 years in Sacramento where he's really blossomed as a player, 19.2 points per game, 7.1 assists, and 13.2 rebounds. It's not quite a triple-double, but you're in triple-double territory. He's been All-NBA twice during that time as well. He's gotten MVP votes. He's a good player. He plays a ton of games too. In Sacramento, he has played 79 games, 82 games, 70 games in his full seasons there. Those are very good numbers, and you could use someone like that in New Orleans. However, I do find Sabonis to be kind of, as the kids say, mid. Not quite like that, above average mid maybe is the way to put it. I'm near 40. I'm not going to be able to nail these kind of analogies here. He's a guy that, to me, is a good player, but not like a superstar, all-star level guy. He is the type of player that if you want to be what the Sacramento Kings are, kind of chasing the play-in tournament every single year, you can build around this guy. But he does not give you the high-end ceiling of being the best player on a championship team or the best player on a team that's going to make a deep playoff run. And in fact, after the Sacramento Kings traded away De'Aaron Fox this past year to the San Antonio Spurs, you saw Sabonis' numbers really drop. when he kind of unquestionably became the best player on the team and their number one guy. To me, he just does not really add to winning by himself. If you're pairing him with Zion, absolutely. You can talk me into that even if I don't love him as a player, but you're not asking him to be number one. Here in this situation, he's kind of the number one guy on the Pelicans, and I just don't love that sort of situation for them. The other parts of the deal just kind of scream a little bit of overcorrection in the front court for me, like course correcting with PJ Washington and Jared Vanderbilt. Washington's good, can be your kind of small ball five or power forward that you need, especially with Sabonis as a center, but you're giving away Yves Missi in this one, and he showed some pretty good skill sets there. Jose Alvarado going away basically in exchange for PJ Washington is like, I don't know if I just want to get rid of like the heart and soul of the team at times like that. The other thing to factor in, we'll talk more about this in the next segment here, is you're adding $14 million per fanspo to the Pelicans salary cap in this deal. That's not great. I think it's not exactly that, but you're adding, a ton of salary that is actively going to kind of like harm you here in what you're trying to do. You need to waive some players to make this work because of that. Definitely wouldn't quite work in my opinion here. So that's why I'm giving it a C-, right? If you're doing this, you're still like a play-in tournament at best team without having the at least high upside of Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson, if he's healthy for the full season, is going to have a much more winning impact, in my opinion, than Sabonis will. And so I'm not going to just kind of swap those two guys and maybe you raise your floor up a little bit, but what's the floor here, right? If your ceiling's already kind of a play-in tournament team with Zion on there, you raise your floor up. Is that exactly going to do anything for you? And I think the answer is no. So I don't love this deal for those reasons, essentially. Part of it is just Sabonis doesn't really do it for me as a player anymore. A couple years ago, maybe, but he hasn't really been able to elevate the Kings in a way that, we would have been hoping for from him after that third seed year that they had. And look, part of that is they're the Kings and they're a little bit dysfunctional, but it's not like New Orleans is considered a much significantly better organization than the Sacramento Kings are. So this trade, even though I like Sabonis, just doesn't do it. If you could find a way to put Sabonis on New Orleans without giving up Zion Williamson, you might need to give up a Herb Jones or a Trey Murphy in that type of trade. It just doesn't do it for me here. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. You'll still be kind of where you are right now. To me, if you're just kind of staying the same, that's a C. Partially because I don't like Sabonis. I'm giving this a C-. But what would you grade this trade? Again, it is the Lakers getting Jordan Hawkins, the Kings getting Zion, Missi, Carlo, the Mavs getting Jose Alvarado, and then the Pelicans getting Sabonis, PJ Washington, and Jared Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's not a guy I'm high on either. Washington's fine, but whatever. This trade just it just doesn't move me. I see the logic behind some of this, and Sabonis plays a ton of games, can help you with rebounding, running your offense, and scoring too in a way that Zion Williamson doesn't quite do. But at the same point, the upside for Sabonis, I think, is limited. That's not even getting into Sabonis's age. If he was, 23, 24, yeah, you could talk me into it. But he's 29 right now. He will be 30 this season. You're getting closer to the wrong age, I think, than what you'd really be looking for. So he's just not someone that really does it for me at this point in time. Unless you were to pair him with Zion Williamson, then I'm a little bit more intrigued, but we're going by the trades that we see here. So I give this one a C-. Let me know what you would give the trade in the comments down below on YouTube. So coming up next, I got another trade that I'm going to give a bad grade for a similar but very different reason. Let's get into that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day. It's a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. So for just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Look, I like the favorite in Lamar Jackson for MVP. You're getting good odds at plus 400 there. For the Super Bowl, the Eagles at plus 700. There's no reason to go against them here. And look, I even like the Saints to win more than 6.5 games here. Not as great odds, but plus 250 for that. You're going to make some money if all of those hit. And you can parlay them all together too. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only over at FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. For your second listen, it's Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson is breaking down everything that happened in that second preseason game. A really good game from Spencer Rattler. I had fun watching. It was nice to see games played in the Superdome as well. Make Locked On Saints your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's break down another hypothetical fake trade here. And if you've got your own, submit them. I'm going to be working on the fan survey this week to get it out to y'all for next week or later in this week to see if we can kind of run with this. We'll turn it into a week's worth of shows breaking that down. I've got some really good questions in there that I'm excited to use. But right now, if you've got a hypothetical trade, send it over to me. It's going to be a lot of fun, and maybe it'll get on the show and graded here. We're deep in the off season, so anything that makes my life a little bit easier would be great. So let's look at a hypothetical trade between the Warriors and the Pelicans. The Pelicans send Jordan Hawkins and a 2031 first-round pick that is top 8 protected in exchange for Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield is a great shooter. The team needs more of that. Hawkins has been a little bit inconsistent, but Buddy Hield is like quietly like an all-time great three-point shooter. It's really interesting to see, in his 9 years in the league, this is someone who's shooting the three at an elite level, near 40% on 7.5 attempts per game. He's just an elite shooter. New Orleans, you got to make that DeMarcus Cousins trade at the time, even knowing how it worked out. But this is someone who is like an all-time great three-point shooter, and you could use that guy on the team right now. It'd be kind of cool little reunion here, even though Buddy Hield really didn't play in New Orleans all that long. It was really just 57 games his rookie year. But I'm giving this trade an F. I am giving a trade that brings in a 40% shooter on good volume an F. And there's a couple of reasons for it. By doing this trade, you're adding money onto the salary cap. The Pelicans, as I have the calculations right now, are right around $4.2 million under the luxury tax. You have, let me pull up the numbers for Buddy Hield, his contract. You have Jordan Hawkins, who is making $4.74 million this year. Buddy Hield is making $9.22 million this year. So you're adding essentially like, a little under $5 million to the books here. So this trade, by my calculations, puts the Pelicans into the luxury tax by about $250,000. So not only are you giving up a future first, even if it's top 8 protected for Buddy Hield, you're now going to need to use another draft pick to make a trade that dumps some salary and gets you under the luxury tax. To me, this kind of is just bad asset management. One of the things that you are going to need to consider in any hypothetical trade that you're putting out there is what it does for the Pelicans salary cap. Some of these trade machines online really don't do a good job of kind of like showing that. This one's showing the Pelicans have tax space, and like, no, they don't after this sort of deal. If you're adding $4.4 million and you're at $4.2 million in luxury tax room, that's not gonna work here. This move works. You can do it legally, but you've got to factor in that, there are constraints to the team. And one of them is this one. They are one of 2 franchises that has never paid the luxury tax. And look, love that, but I also don't think it's the worst thing. Has there really been a team other than the Chris Paul era where it's like they should have paid the luxury tax? And the answer to me is kind of like, no. Now, they're profitable. You can afford to pay it, you know, even if you don't need to pay it for that kind of thing, or if there's a team that's deserving of it. You know, just going for it is something to be said, I think. But, you know, they're not going to pay the luxury tax this year. Unless this team comes out the gates 10-0 and they look like world beaters, and none of us are expecting that, and we're conceivably looking at this trade before the season starts, they're not going to pay the luxury tax. So if you put them into the luxury tax, they're going to need to make a move that then dumps some salary. So if you didn't like the way they managed draft pick assets on draft night with the Derek Queen trade, this deal of giving up, even if it's top 8 protected for Buddy Hield, a future first, knowing then that you can't really trade it later, and then you're going to need to use some sort of draft pick to dump a contract, it's kind of like a move that compounds on itself a little bit. And that's not what we want to see the New Orleans Pelicans do. That, to me, is bad asset management. Love Buddy Hield. Love Buddy Hield as a player. Would make a ton of sense on this team. You need to find another way to do it. Could you do Buddy Hield for Hawkins and Jose Alvarado? Sure. Do I want to do that? Maybe not. But then you at least start to have a deal make more sense. You've got $4.2 million of wiggle room before we even get into the Jalen McDaniels signing that the team did and kind of what that could mean for the books and things like that as well. So this deal, Buddy for Hawkins, to me is just an F because you're going to need to do other things. Look, I'd like to be in a world where I give this a great, a great grade because it would make sense for the team. You could even talk to me into some protections on a pick or something like that. I'd probably do lottery protected, something along those lines. And I'd probably give it a good grade. But one of the things that I do here on the show, not always, but sometimes, is we're going to look at things through the lens of what will the team do, right? This isn't NBA 2K. We'll do a show on the ratings and stuff because I just saw a number of the players' ratings there, which I think is kind of fun to look at, especially in a dead period in the NBA calendar. But we're looking at kind of the team operating as they're going to. So, when I say like a realistic best case scenario, it's factoring in whatever limitations there are. And that luxury tax line is definitely a limitation for this team. So that's why I'm giving this such a bad grade. You have to factor that stuff in of what makes sense, what's realistic. Same thing with the Sabonis trade, right? Adding $14 million to the books, you can kind of do that. The team's really hard capped at the first apron, so they really only have like $6 million to add there. That's about their 5.9 away from that right now, according to my calculation. So like you need to finagle that trade a little bit more to make it make more sense with the financial realities that the Pelicans are facing. But even then, before you get there, I'm just not interested in Sabonis and this team going into the luxury tax and all of that because of that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I view it all really right now. Part of that first apron room being kind of where it is because they have a bunch of incentives that kind of factor into the first apron. They really have about like 11 million or so, 12 million in room to the first apron, depending on some of that. So if you get rid of some of those incentives, you can clear that out pretty easily, pretty quickly, by the way, when it comes down to it. Salary cap is something, y'all. It can be really weird to try and like navigate through some of these moves. It's hard being a front office executive. Like it truthfully is, in my opinion, when it comes to everything. I'm trying to see if I can find the total incentives that they have on this team. I don't have them in front of me here. I might need to kind of break it down as a single year, but we might be able to. If we can find it, incentives, no, they're somewhere. We can kind of go over those in a future show. I think that could be kind of interesting to look at what some of the incentives of the players are and how that could impact things and moves that the Pelicans could make here. But both these trades, C- and an F. Sorry that it's harsh. This trade, by the way, for Buddy Hield, also from Fanspo, comes from 2K_ChompyDoc79, which is kind of a funny name. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Is this one an F? Factoring in the realities of the situation for New Orleans with the luxury tax, let me know what you think in the comments down below on YouTube. So coming up next, Pelicans signed Jalen McDaniels. There might be an asterisk on this, but it's actually going to make training camp kind of interesting. We're going to break it down. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. For your second listen, it's got to be Locked On NBA Game Night. I'm on there every Friday. We are breaking down the NBA schedule, looking at some of the biggest matchups on there. We're going to be covering every single game this season. It's going to be a little bit later on some nights. All of that. Make the Locked On NBA Game Night podcast, yes, even in the offseason, your first listen today and every day. Part of the Locked On podcast, or sorry, your second listen. First listen's Locked On Pelicans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So final news, this came from Shams Charania, that the Pelicans are signing Jalen McDaniels to the team. You know, with the Washington Wizards last year, more on that in a second, but this is someone who's played 6 years in the NBA, has averaged 6.7 points per game, 1.2 assists, 3.3 rebounds, is not a particularly great shooter, just 32% from three. He plays on the wing, 6'9". He's just kind of like a hustle rebounding guy that is pretty athletic, that can have some defensive side to him, upside to him, but overall, it's just kind of like a body, a meh kind of player. It might be similar to Jaden Springer. We haven't gotten clarification on this, but Springer was basically signed to a training camp deal where he's going to have a chance to compete for a roster spot. I would assume it's going to be pretty similar to Jaden McDaniels here is what they're going to be doing, I think. The Pelicans have one open roster spot, $4.2 million under the luxury tax. Would it be better to go into the season with that spot open? Maybe add somebody that you could waive a little bit later. That's likely what I think they're doing here. This makes training camp a little bit interesting because, look, there's kind of a battle here for this final roster spot. Could it be one of the two-way guys? Could it be Jaden Springer? Could it be Jalen McDaniels? There's a couple other guys that are out there as available free agents that I think are a little bit more interesting. But if those guys were going to come here, a Russell Westbrook or somebody, then I think that would have been done by now. Chris Paul really wasn't an option for the team whatsoever, as we've seen. So I think they're just going to have this final roster spot just be a little bit of a battle. And I kind of like that. Just add some, not just intrigue in training camp, but competition. You know that Jalen McDaniels, Jaden Springer are going to be working hard. Both those guys kind of make their money on the defensive side of the ball. If they're trying to earn a roster spot, that's likely going to be them really competing on the defensive side of the ball in training camp. And does that then mean that they are going to be, pushing those other guys harder? I kind of like that idea. I do like that move of just bringing in, athletic defenders who are going to make these guys work on offense, at least in training camp, kind of dangling a carrot, a contract as a carrot on a stick in front of them to make them work as hard as they possibly can in training camp, and hopefully then just increase the level of competitiveness for some of these practices and in preseason for as long as you're keeping these guys. I think it's probably smarter to go into the season with an open roster spot than it would be to sign one of these guys. Maybe someone gets waived in final roster cuts that's kind of surprising and you can pounce on them. We saw that a little bit with Brandon Boston Jr. last year as they signed him to a two-way. That's to me what I think the team should do, but I wouldn't be shocked if you hear another name or two kind of added to this team, but I don't think they're signing Jaden Springer just to an active roster spot, fully guaranteed contract or anything like that right now. Now, it is also worth noting that McDaniels played last year for the Washington Wizards. Why is that important? Do I need to tell you? Troy Weaver consulted for the Washington Wizards last season. He acquired Saddiq Bey, Jordan Poole. This is the third time that he's basically helped Saddiq Bey get on a team, right? Poole was a guy that, he was around last year. We know the connections to the DMV area as well with Derek Queen and others. Again, all roads lead back to Troy Weaver here as, again, not like a shadow GM or anything like that. He's the second highest ranking person in the basketball ops organization as far as we know after Joe Dumars. But it does feel like, and so that person's impact, that person's voice, right, should be pretty outsized compared to other people. Your number 2 guy is going to be the dude making a lot of the moves, a lot of the decisions here with everything, right? That's how it kind of works in a front office. Joe Dumars has the final say on that, but maybe he's just kind of tasking Troy Weaver with doing all of that. And he's just kind of acting as, kind of not a figurehead, but in other ways, right? But I do think he's, signing off on all this. Joe Dumars has said that when he hired Troy Weaver, that Troy's the best. This is someone he really trusts, someone he thinks is really, really good. But you're seeing Troy Weaver's fingerprints all over this team, even on little moves like this. Good or bad, if you ask Pistons fans, it's not good. We'll see. It's really going to come down to how does Derek Queen perform, when he's healthy after needing surgery on his wrist. It's just kind of how it's going right now, right? You have connections to Troy Weaver. There's a good chance you're going to be here in New Orleans, it seems like, in some capacity. Do you want to be plucking tons of guys who are associated with a bad Wizards team last year? I think Jordan Poole's underrated. I have some really good stats we'll share about him this week. But again, they were not good last year. Is that what you want to do? The answer to that is probably no. So it makes you wonder just a little bit, makes you concerned. Maybe there will be a question about that in the fan survey that I'm going to hopefully have done in the next day or two for y'all. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. What do you think about Jalen McDaniels? Do you think he has a good chance of making the team? Or are you just like, no, want nothing to do with him? Let me know in the comments down below. Give those 2 trades a grade in the comments down below as well. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate y'all so much for listening. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow. Give me your fake trades. We'll grade them here on the show. See y'all next time.